Hello and welcome back to A Book a Day podcast. This week we are discussing Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. In the previous episode, I discussed the idea of lightness and weight. It started with Nietzsche's eternal recurrence and how Kundera flips that idea and talks about how in a world where everything is not repeating itself infinite times, in fact, it is happening only once, what choices do we make in that world? So, that was the philosophical idea. In this episode, I will talk about another philosophical idea that comes up in the book. In fact, it comes up right after the first section of lightness and weight. And this is the conundrum of the soul and the body. It's an age-old question, but it is always relevant. And I think Kundera beautifully explains with the help of this story. I'm sure by now most of you are familiar with the story, the key characters of the book. In case you're not, let me quickly repeat it. There is Thomas, who is a kind of a womanizer. He's having multiple affairs. Then he falls in love with Teresa. He marries her, but still continues his ways of having affairs. And one of those women that he's dating outside the marriage is Sabina. Sabina is she's a painter, she's an artist, and she's also having multiple affairs. She's kind of free-loving, rather freedom-loving spirit. So now, coming back to the question of soul and the body. First of all, Kundera begins this section of the novel with a reflection on modern world, modern understanding of ourselves. He says that science has given us the power to map and measure every organ of the body. So now we speak very easily of the brain, the lungs, the heart. We name every part distinctly. But in this manner of describing ourselves, something has quietly disappeared, and that is the soul. What was once invisible, and in fact it was still the essence of our humanity, of what it meant to be human, now it has been reduced to anatomy or the grey matter of the brain. Let me quote him from the book. He says, "The old duality of body and soul has become shrouded in scientific terminology, and we can laugh at it as merely an obsolete prejudice." So that's the stage that Kundera sets for us in this section. So in this case, Teresa and Thomas, they're not just individuals, they're not just characters in this story, they're kind of symbols. At least that's how I interpret it. I see it as Teresa, she is a symbol of the soul, and Thomas, he is a symbol of the body. And let me explain why I feel that. If you look at Thomas's character, he is always kind of restless. He's drawn to new pleasures, new conquests. He insists on separating love from sex, claiming that the body's pleasures, they do not threaten his love for Teresa. So he can separate his idea of soul from the body. That's kind of the curse, Kundera says. That's the curse that the modern world has put on us. Let me read this passage from the previous section, which gives you an idea of what he was going through or what his perspective was on relationships. It goes, was he genuinely incapable of abandoning his erotic friendships? He was. It would have torn him apart. He lacked the strength to control his taste for other women. Besides, he failed to see the need. No one knew better than he how little his exploits threatened Teresa. Why then give them up? He saw no more reason for that than to deny himself soccer matches. But was it still a matter of pleasure? Even as he set out to visit another woman, he found her distasteful and promised herself he would not see her again. He constantly had Teresa's image before his eyes, and the only way he could erase it was by quickly getting drunk. Ever since meeting Teresa, he had been unable to make love to other women without alcohol. But alcohol on his breath was a sure sign of Teresa, for Teresa, of his infidelity. He was caught in a trap. Even on his way to see them, he found them distasteful. But one day without them, and he was back on the phone, eager to make contact. He still felt most comfortable with Sabina. He knew she was discreet and would not divulge their rendezvous. Her studio greeted him like a memento of his past, his idyllic bachelor past. So that seems like a metaphor to me, metaphor for the body that is yearning for pleasures, even though sometimes it is feeling guilty, even though sometimes it is reluctant to pursue its pleasures, but still it cannot help it. The body always ends up seeking the pleasures. On the other hand, if you think about it, Teresa seems like the soul, and the body cannot escape the soul, cannot escape as far as life is there. So what does soul or Teresa, what does she long for? She longs for unity, she longs for fidelity, but at the same time you have to remember, but while she's trying to attach herself to Thomas, that is also the cause of her suffering. She is trying very hard to get herself attached to the body, to her own body, then to Thomas, but she suffers because of it. And that's really the journey of the soul. Coming back to her life, her whole life, it seems, is shaped by the struggle between the body and the soul. As a young girl, she used to look into the mirror, she would search her reflection for a sign of her essence, her soul. But all she could see was a body like any other body, which is also something that her mother reminded her of, that her body was no different, it was just like anybody else's. And that's why her deepest, her most important quest was to discover the soul underneath this sameness, this really commonplace body, flesh. So now you see this interplay of body and soul. On one side, there is body, Thomas, who's moving freely through life, only following his desires. But that is not just a positive thing. It's not something that you can idealize this freedom, because the body is suffering too. Thomas is longing for the companionship with Teresa. Even though he's betraying her, he's letting her down, he's constantly craving her, he's longing for that companionship. And then on the other side, she also wants him, but she's also suffering because of him. So these body and soul, they remain entangled. They are pulling against each other. They're causing pain to each other. And so the life goes. That's the relationship of the body and the soul. As I said, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's what it seems like to me. Especially, that's really the name of the chapter. Soul and body. And of course, when he talks about all these struggles, the suffering, he goes into the details of it. The details are very vivid, and they come about in different ways. And especially two scenarios, they seem very interesting to me. The first one is Teresa's dreams. What happens in them is Thomas appears, and he appears not as her protector, but as a betrayer, and he causes her humiliation. Let me read it from the book, what that humiliation looks like to Teresa in her dreams. And this is in first person because Teresa herself is describing her dream to Thomas. She says, I was at a large indoor swimming pool. There were about 20 of us, all women. We were naked and had to march around the pool. There was a basket hanging from the ceiling and a man standing in the basket. The man wore a broad-brimmed hat shading his face, but I could see it was you. You kept giving us orders, shouting at us. We had to sing as we marched, sing and do knee bends. If one of us did a bad knee bend, you would shoot her with a pistol and she would fall dead into the pool, which made everybody laugh and sing even louder. You never took your eyes off us. At the minute we did something wrong, you would shoot. The pool was full of corpses floating just below the surface, and I knew I lacked the strength to do the next knee bend, and you were going to shoot me. So that was the dream, and later Kundera does a lot of analysis, gives us the past of Teresa, where she is coming from, her childhood trauma, and then comes this particular passage which I am going to narrate now, and it gives some answers, interesting answers. It says, that was what the dream was meant to tell Thomas, what Teresa was unable to tell him herself. She had come to him to escape her mother's world, a world where all bodies were equal. She had come to him to make her body unique, irreplaceable, but he too had drawn an equal sign between her and the rest of them. He kissed them all alike, stroked them alike, made absolutely no distinction between Teresa's body and the other bodies. He had sent her back into the world she tried to escape, sent her to march naked with the other naked women. So once again, I'm reading too much into it, but it seems like that's the soul's journey. Soul, although every soul is pretty much alike, it's the same, but it comes into the body's form to find its uniqueness, to differentiate itself. And sometimes the body betrays it. It doesn't give it a unique identity. That's what Teresa is experiencing. And body is not giving you unique your own identity. You are restless, you suffer. Then there is the another concept which Kundera explains later in the section, and I found it really interesting. It's about vertigo. Let me read it from the passage and then I will discuss it further. He says, anyone whose goal is something higher must expect someday to suffer vertigo. What is vertigo? Fear of falling? Then why do we feel it even when the observation tower comes equipped with a sturdy handrail? No, vertigo is something other than the fear of falling. It is the voice of the emptiness below us which tempts us and lures us. It is the desire to fall, against which, terrified, we defend ourselves. And that again seems like a really deep philosophical exploration to me. For Teresa, vertigo here, in this case, it expresses her despair, her jealousy, her insecurity, her suffering. All of that has been mentioned through her dreams, all these insecurities, jealousies. They are not just personal, they are metaphysical. It seems to me that she embodies not just her own emotions and fears and psychological states, but she embodies humanity's fallenness, humanity's inability to reconcile the body with the soul. So that's the allegory that I see in this section. Through Teresa and Thomas, we understand the interplay of soul and body. As I said before, the body, symbolized by Thomas, it seeks a multiplicity, it seeks freedom. But can it ever escape the soul? It cannot. As long as life is there, the body cannot escape the soul. On the other hand, soul can escape the body. That's when death happens. That's when Teresa leaves Thomas. Although they get back together, but that's again a symbol, a sign that she leaves him. That's about death. But we have to remember the soul, in this case symbolized by Teresa, she also longs for unity. She just doesn't want to escape. But she is wounded by the body's unending desires. So essentially, the body and the soul, they're bound together. They are incomplete without each other. And yet, they are locked in this never-ending conflict. So this is really interesting if we are going to interpret it that way. And again, going back to the initial point, that even if the modern science has banished the soul from our vocabulary, the soul still remains. It still suffers. It suffers in Teresa's jealousy, it suffers in her dreams, it suffers in her vertigo, which is again a symbolism for the fallenness of humanity. The entire humanity suffers. The soul suffers. It suffers because the body refuses to give up on infidelity, it refuses to give up on its desires. So through this kind of deep philosophical exploration, it seems to me Milan Kundera, he revives this ancient question. What does it mean to be human? And perhaps to me, it seems like from the book that the unbearable lightness of being is not just the restless freedom of the body, but it is also the unbearable suffering of the soul. Thank you very much for listening, and I will continue exploring these philosophical ideas. I'll continue sharing the more interesting insights from the book. And for that, you'll have to tune it again. And I hope you'll keep following. Thank you very much once again. I'll catch you the next time.